was Malika on the call?
Pastor says she's got something to do this morning.
Thought I saw her for a second. She sent me a message the other day. I guess we're gonna try to meet in the next week or so. Okay. Welcome back for everyone who is tuning in, if we're actually recording.
We are.
But otherwise, are there any questions from anybody that wants to ask a question or throw something out there? Maybe just us.
Yeah.
Small group this morning.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We don't have to. We can just go all out there.
Oh.
Yeah, right. That might be what's the reason it's a small group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who went last week? I think we were talking about, one of the things we talked about was everything already being before it manifested. But I wanted to kind of sort of talk about how the communication between what we call higher self and lower self.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say that is because last week I think I shared this with Janice, I'm not sure. Last week I had an experience on Monday. I could see this and feel this dark energy coming like in a vortex, like into one side of me. And, and I felt it. Well, I couldn't, and I could see it, but the one who saw it and was experiencing it is not the one who's talking to you. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But when I got to greater faith, I sat and I began to breathe, and I focused on a wound, and as I was meditating there, I could see the vortex of darkness exit, and it was light. And after that, I began to experience things like I could almost hear what you were thinking, or knew what people were going to say next. And later presented me with a dream that someone else had never seen before. Immediately I had the answer to what it meant. She called, she said it couldn't mean that, until she called the lady and found out that's what it was. As a matter of fact, it was the lady had a dream about this kid coming to see her, and the kid saying, I want you to take care of me. And she said, no, you need to go up the street. And the kid said, no, I want you to take care of me. And she wanted to know what it meant. And immediately I told her it was abortion. And she said, no, she didn't have an abortion. I know she didn't have an abortion. So she goes home and called the lady and found out in 1988 she had an abortion. So it was, those kinds of things I were able to see instantly. And there's been some other experiences since then. So the space between the mean, the spiritual, and the space and the mean in a physical, natural sense. I don't mean physical, I mean natural. Because I know, and the other thing I wanted to look at, if you have thought about it, is that the body, the physical being, never ceases to be. The physical never ceases. It's just a matter of the physical being in sync or in balance with the spiritual or with the greater. Got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we die and we decompose, or our body decomposes anyway, are you saying?
Say again. Say again. There. I got weirded out because I'm looking at you one way and I'm hearing you another.
Oh,
Go ahead.
So when we make our transition,
Mm-hmm.
still in the earth realm, and it begins to break down. But you're saying that happens because it is no longer in sync with the spirit.
Yeah, I say that it breaks down, period, because of it's no longer in sync.
Yeah.
Yeah. I view it as confusion at the cellular level. The cells don't transmit energy the way they were designed to because of the confusion. And as a result of that, we end up with sickness, disease, joint bad, old age, all kinds of things, because the body was not actually designed to cease to be. And one of the reasons the body will never cease to be in terms of no more humans on earth is because they were created by the atom, and the atom has the nature of the Elohim. So, it's developing the nature of the Elohim in itself. Therefore, everything it brings into existence is eternal. But we come to stages where things get renewed. Like, for example, when we talk about the Ice Age, that wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of another period, you see? Because we have not gotten in sync yet. Suppose the indigenous people in South America or wherever who saw, who were in sync rather with nature, were able to bring other things into balance in the earth. Suppose that if that had taken place, then would we be at that place of balance? I think we would be. If the recognition of what that balance meant was understood better, as opposed to assigning being in sync to nature itself. You know, being in sync with nature is not being in sync with the spiritual. It's a different thing. Because being in sync with nature is like being in sync with yourself. The whole earth groans, waiting for the human, waiting for the atom to be redeemed.
Yeah.
I hope I'm making sense.
So in essence then, you're saying if you were to create sort of an imagery about what you're saying, you have the aura or the notion of the spiritual self, for want of a better term, illuminating or giving life, if you want, to the physical, that connection.
Mm-hmm.
The physical needs that, call it energy for want of anything else, to be animated.
To have life. Yeah.
To be animated.
Yeah.
So then the notion of dying or the separation leaves then the body how? I can understand the aging either because the separation is gradual, or I think you're saying no, it's more so aging prior to real separation, and all that comes with aging is due to the what's remaining of any of the sort of confusions that are in that connection.
Yes.
So you can almost think of it as electromagnetic and any kind of interference or something. So that creates stresses on the body that it wasn't really designed to manage,
Right.
which causes deterioration.
Absolutely.
But then you still reach a point where there's separation.
And
But that doesn't mean the body is trash.
right.
Because if you then go back to sort of physics or Einstein, it might just deteriorate, but the essence of it, or the molecular whatever, it just goes back into the soup
And I think
of the
that
natural
now,
world.
this is the other end of that, Richard. Well, I think I'm
Does that make
saying
any sense?
it does. I can see the picture that you drew.
It doesn't have to be accurate, but that's what I...
The other end of that is that the body was designed to transform and not to deteriorate. The transformation was expressed with Jesus, with the experience that he had on what we call the mountaintop experience with Moses and Elijah, with the ability of the Richard Endora to call Samuel back. You see what I'm talking about? So it was examples of how we are supposed to be transformed as opposed to deterioration. And the deterioration of the body takes place based upon, yes, the confusion that that the energy has as it flows.
So the body, I mean, I imagine we probably said this one way or another, the body's the mechanism through which, the conduit by which the spiritual presence in this natural life is provided an opportunity to reunify, to transform.
Right.
Any imperfection or incompleteness in that shows in the body. Actually, I guess it would show in the spiritual, but you don't see it in this world. In the same sense that you've got an old appliance or something that starts to, you know, it's not as efficient as it was when you first bought it, because the wiring is wearing out, or who knows what. Something like that?
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell.
Who said yes?
It's like, I guess what I'm saying is that Jesus is the one that we point to, who would be the best example of what we were designed to be. And design is, I use that very loosely.
Right.
What we were designed to be. Now, what I see, and if you see it differently, please help me out here. What I see is that Jesus' resurrection was, it means the resurrection of truth, or the rebirth of truth. That, him having that take place, was an example of how the atom redeems itself and becomes Elohim. Can you see that?
Yep.
You see that? What I'm saying is, if this is Adam, right, and this is Elohim. Now, in order for Adam to have to express this essence, then it has to be in sync with it. But rather than be in sync with it, it dishonored it. For this cause, will you leave your father, boom, that's dishonor. And in order to get back in sync, you must honor it. Honor thy father, boom, that days may be long upon the earth. You see, okay. So now, what Jesus is that clay like we are, right? So, bam, he dead on the cross in the sepulcher. When he comes back, he still looks the same in terms of the physical eyes, but he's not the same, because now he has the essence of Elohim to the point where it's supposed to be from the beginning. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, so what I'm saying is, that is, I believe that that's the ultimate journey for us. When he talks about going back to beginning, that's the ultimate journey, because he doesn't say go back to Elohim. It's going back to beginning, because you can't go back to what you already are.
But do we also then understand his, for want of a better term, return? The purpose was for teaching? I mean, in the same sense that in Buddhism you understand that there are bodhisattvas, or by definition, I think, if I got it right, it's been a while since I paid attention. The bodhisattva chooses to return, almost like the Dalai Lama chooses to return, has the option, chooses to return to continue to teach and help others, sort of thing. So, as opposed to just...
This is the funny thing about that with Jesus. If you look at it from the original text, it does not say that he's going to return, that I will come again to you that you may be right. It's not there. What it actually says is, I will come to you, or I will be one with you, is what it's saying. The idea, the question becomes, if this is true, then what is the avenue, what is the technology, what is the method of moving to this place of balance or rhythm so that we can be the essence and expression of what we just described. And that what Jesus was the essence and reflection of. How do we do that? Because we lose sight sometimes, I think, because of earlier teachings, that he wasn't the only one who appeared, after that. He wasn't the only one who did that. And when I say appeared, I'm talking about in bodily form. He was not the only one who did that. So how do we get to the place where we, and I use this metaphorically, of course, how do we get to the place where we die on the cross, placed in the sepulchre, and is resurrected, so that we are reflective of what he reflected? How do we do that? I think that's one of the questions that we must grapple with and at some point answer. And I think we're on the road to answering if we don't have all the answers. So.
Well, from what we were talking about sort of at the beginning, getting more in sync or syncing our higher self with our quote lower self, so that there is no need for the body to deteriorate, is one of the ways in which we can go about doing that. So I was kind of thinking of in the beginning, when you first come into the physical experience, I guess you could say your momentum is very high. It's kind of like when you get a really good idea and you're like, oh, that sounds great, I want to do this. But over time, if you don't actively pursue it, if you don't actively increase the degree to which you are in sync with your higher self, then that idea fades and you go, oh, okay, maybe I'll do it later, maybe I'll do other stuff. And so over time, you lose it completely. So to use that analogy with how the spirit influences the body, in the beginning, we have all this energy, and over time, we begin to age. Eventually, because we don't either understand or we aren't willing to actively pursue what that energy is and bring it into our experience more so than it was at first. And so gradually, as our spiritual momentum, our inertia for even being in this place in the first place, it degrades, and so does the body degrade, because we don't fulfill the purpose for which we subconsciously know that we were here in the first place. And so essentially, spiritually speaking, we kind of get bored, or we kind of get we realize that if we're not here to fulfill the purpose, there's no need for us to be here. And so
Go ahead, Nick, I'm sorry.
And so the gradual withdrawal from this place takes place. Go ahead. And I was going to add some more to that.
I was, when you were talking, what hit me was the 90th Psalm, when Moses talks about the length of life on earth, what changed it. It was how long will this diminishing of the physical last? Because prior to Moses was actually talking about in that 90th Psalm that there was a period when men lived hundreds of years, but now it had been reduced. So how long would this happen? And the answer to that is not it's not for the Creator to give. The answer to that is for us to give, because the question that Moses raised was rhetorical. How long? He was asking the Creator that, but it's how long will we continue to accept who we are in terms of the human and reject what we were truly created to be, and by virtue of our attachment to those things that we have created, as opposed to the one who created us. So what I see there is that Moses is also talking about the beginning of man's demise in bodily form based upon the distance that he perceived himself to be from the one who created him. The more we organize religion, the further we push ourselves in our minds anyway away from God. Because what we are saying is that when we, one of the things that I talked about during the course of the week is that when we use the term God, we are not talking about the Elohim. When we use the term God, I'm talking about religion now. When we use the term God in organized religion, we are talking about the position that Ein Sof holds. You know, the source of everything. That's what we're talking about. We are not referencing even Yahweh. We just referencing. We saying that Elohim is the essence of everything that is, when that's not true. So the more we believe that and pass that on generation after generation, then the more we begin to degenerate at a faster pace. And I don't mean in terms of time. I'm talking about in terms of diseases that just seemingly appear. When we talk about the whole concept, it seems like everybody has cancer somewhere. You see? But there was a time when that was not so. So the greater the confusion is with the cancers, you see what I'm talking about? So the more we bring diseases into the earth, we are the creators of that. So how long will you keep doing this? You know, when will you get to the point where you realize that instead of diminishing your life, the expectancy of it is not for you to live a long time, but the expectancy of it for you to be in rhythm with. That makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't know how to repeat that. Which part of it?
no, the thing I was thinking too is, so really time is more, to a certain extent, it's more of a qualitative thing than a physical traveling from point A to point B.
Yes.
Okay? Because I know, I remember being influenced by something I read years ago called Seasons of a Man's Life. And the guy who wrote the book apologized that he didn't have research to do women, but he thought it was pretty much the same. Anyway, but if you sort of dangerously combine that, as I do very often in my mind, with the sort of Montessori notion, which I felt personally in my early teen years, I felt a very strong spiritual kind of energy. So I got interested in a lot of related topics, and maybe it was too intellectual, wasn't enough personal, but there was enough personal. Anyway, so my sense now, at the age I am, as much as that middle part of your life is full of all the distractions that you can be privy to, there is a period in your older years, and I'm only middle-aged, I guess, where that comes back, or the opportunity for that comes back. And on a superficial level, we talk about reliving some of those earlier dreams and things you had when you were a kid, right? You revisit them. I'm just telling you some of my own experience. But I think wrapped up in that is also an opportunity to sort of rekindle a spiritual journey and growth. And I think some of that can be manifest in the fact that there are people who can seem to be aging, and if they quote unquote give in to that, some of that aging is delayed or reversed. And I think of I went to a Buddhist retreat years ago in Maryland, and I think it was a Cambodian, essentially sponsored place. And they were always talking about the monks who came, and I just missed their being there. And they used to call the ashram that they came from in Cambodia the beauty salon. Because apparently people, older, who with intention and integrity, went there to meditate, reflect, etc., got younger looking. And some of that was, and we see it in ourselves and in others, that sort of youthfulness and energy and vibrance in the face. The face being the most uncovered part of the body that's going to show anything, and very, very much an indicator. Right? So, I don't know why I'm dragging on all this, except that
So when you
that prompting is there, and when it has an opportunity in your life's journey to come back, it will come up. And I'm saying my sense is, at this stage, it does, because you've pretty much done what you're going to do materially, I guess, and all that kind of stuff. So there's just other things that start pushing themselves to the surface. But the effect, if you give into that, I think, is you can, for want of a better term, retard, maybe reverse, I don't know, change the course of what your physicalness was otherwise on course to be. Does that make any sense at all?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. And I think there's a difference between the sort of aging that is deterioration and the aging that is approaching maturation. So we are supposed to mature, but beyond, once you get to the point where you're mature, spiritually speaking, there is a certain feedback loop that can click on. Once you're mature, that constantly refreshes the physical body so that it doesn't need to go past that point in terms of it being ripe. So, and even in the Hindu system, they have a whole, with regards to what you were just talking about, Dad, that's the whole, like, at first you're a child, then you become a student, then you become a house owner and a wife or a husband. And then, at the end of your life, when sort of all that stuff is taken care of, you go on sannyasa,
Right.
I believe it's called anyway, and you say, all right, I've done all the stuff, peace out. I'm about to go wander the country in search of enlightenment, which is something that still goes on. But it's kind of like modeled after that natural progression. But the truth is, and that's good, but everybody's different. So whenever you feel it, you can seize it then, and begin that from that point. And it doesn't have to necessarily come at a particular age, although we do follow patterns where if we, whatever path we take in life, it will come back up eventually. And then we can choose to follow it then. But
All I was saying, I would think the energy is there. It's no different than, God never left you. Remember, we grew up thinking God's always sitting there. You just haven't said, oh, hey, I need to talk, right? So we have all these notions that you've been abandoned, but in fact, you've just been distracted. So all I'm saying is, I think in myself, I sense there's a natural, a sense of wanting to return to, but I don't have a sense that spiritual, whatever we want to call it, ever abandoned me. I just got really full of other stuff to do.
yeah,
And maybe I'm tired of the other stuff. So now
Yep.
I'm more open to, oh, there you are.
I want to look at something for a second, if I may. I was talking earlier about Moses, right? And I began to look more in depth at that particular song. And if you really look at it, Moses was actually talking to himself. And because when you look at it, stuff like, for we are consumed by thine anger, thine is not there. He said we are consumed by anger. It's not talking about some that the Creator is consumed. That we're without anger is talking about us being consumed by it. And the wrath talks about not only we're consumed by anger, and anger, by the way, comes from the root that means to breathe hard. Or to snort. Because when you get angry, what do? And it says that not only is the anger that we allow ourselves to be consumed by, but when it talks about the wrath, it's talking about fear. And when it talks about trouble, it talks about displeasure. We're never pleased, and we are fearful of everything. The thing that we're fearful of mostly is that we're not going to have something, or something's going to happen to us, or we got to save for a rainy day. Everything is wrought with fear. So he's talking about that these are the things that we have to deal with. And when he talks about in the presence of Elohim, the iniquities, the perverseness of our being has concealed our sight. Secret is talking about the concealment of sight. So we can't see anymore because of the perversity that we are dealing with on a constant basis. And all of this is done in the presence of the enlightenment that constantly appears before us. And when he talks about our days passed away, that's interesting to me, because days is yom, and yom is talking about expansion. So our opportunities to expand are cleared out because of these things that we do. And the word wrath there is not talking about wrath as the same wrath that's in up further. It's talking about arrogance and outpouring. So what it's talking about is that the expansion escapes us because of our arrogance. We think we know everything. We think we can do everything. And the reason we think we can is because we believe our own hype. So it appears as though Moses is talking to himself and thus talking to us, because he is us and we are him. Now let me see if I can kind of tie that together when I say that I think that we have lost we have concealed our sight. We never lost it. And we have gotten caught up in our own hype, right? What I mean by that is this. We have written all these books, commentaries, philosophies, science, whatever. We've written all these books explaining everything that is. And we caught up in that. We think we know everything. We think we can handle everything. We do research that's supposed to deal with one disease, and then something else crops up. Why? Because you are not actually dealing with the disease, you're masking it. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of the disease is to be reflective of the confusion. For the word was sent for the healing of the flesh. The healing of the flesh is not talking about getting rid of cancer. It's talking about your nature. The word is supposed to change your nature. But our nature cannot be changed if we believe our own hype and never really look in depth into what's being said. Because when you read when you hear the 90th Psalm, 99% of the time it's at a funeral. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's at a funeral. And this is not talking about that in any way whatsoever. So I think that this in itself is something that should propel us, or at least should entice us to begin to recall from the things that we have written as men, and begin to see what the word is actually saying. And I push that very hard because nothing else has worked. So why not try it? Why is there such resistance to looking at the book from the original text? Why is there such resistance to that?
Talking about among other people?
Yeah. Why is that such a, because ain't no money in it. There's no money in it. It makes you, it puts you in a place where you are swimming against the tide. You know, the battle there is to keep the human where he is, where it is, as opposed to looking at where it comes from, the original. Why is that so difficult to get people to do? When you look at the commentaries that have been written, and there's no resemblance to what the word is actually saying, none whatsoever. And the other reason I believe that we are so against looking at the original text is because it makes us responsible for ourselves, and it shows us that there's no difference between Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever ism. No difference. So we want to be exclusive rather than inclusive with understanding. We rather be ignorant and exclusive. And our ignorance and our highest level of intellect is only reflective of the level of ignorance to what really happened, of what really is rather. So that's what I put out there. I think you were going to say something.
If everybody understood the original text, then you wouldn't need anybody to try to interpret it for you.
Right.
And so that's what you're saying by there's no money in it.
Yeah.
There's no need for the concordance to be written for somebody to buy. There's no need for me to be the powerful preacher on the TV trying to tell you, interpret for you how the scripture is. You would be able to do it yourself, and you would then come face to face with the question, what do I do about what it is I've become aware of again?
And I can see that clearly, because when I began this trek, the first thing, or first of all, let me say that I remember trying to I would go buy me some commentary, Matthew Perry commentary. I could never purchase a commentary. And when I began this trek, the first thing I did was stay away from commentaries. I stayed away from books. I stayed away from everything that other people had written about the scriptures, totally. And I began to, when I began to study them, then what came to my memory were a lot of things from a course that I took in comparative religions. And I began to see the common thread that runs through all of them. And then I began to understand that, in essence, there is no such thing as Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, etc. There is just life, period. That the people who were what we call the originators of these isms were just men who sought light. And because of our arrogance, we made it be a religious thing as opposed to what it was actually intended to be. And I use religious in the way that we commonly and traditionally use the word religion, of course. So if you look at it from that perspective and look at the word religion come from the Latin meaning to reconnect, then whatever you are putting out there and you calling it religion, it doesn't matter whether you understand it or not, it happens. So you become connected to whatever you are distributing. Does that make sense? So help me. And see if I think I'm seeing something, I don't know.
You said you become connected to whatever you distracted from.
No, whatever you put out there,
Whatever you put out
Yeah.
there.
that's what you become connected to. So,
Well, you could say it a little bit differently maybe, but it's a small point.
see it.
Well, it's not that you become connected to what you put out there, it's what you put out there is a projection of what you're connected to. So of course there's a connection.
That makes sense.
It's like throwing out a fishing line,
Yeah,
right? The line came out of your hand.
yeah.
You didn't, boop, there it is, and now you gotta connect to the bobber in the water. You're already connected, because you projected that out there. So if you follow that backwards,
And that
It's
makes,
you in the mirror,
it does make
always.
sense, yeah.
yeah.
And so, and guess what? If you look at it from the perspective that Richard just described, then every one of us become fishing rods for our kids. We don't want to throw the fishing rods to our kids. Because we are projecting what was projected to us. Aren't we not? That's how it perpetuates itself. So what do? How do we change that?
Tricky analogy.
By virtue of seeing what's really there, as opposed to projecting what we think is there, or writing about what we think, and making it be what we want to be. Because you know, if you want people to believe it, write a book and get a good publisher.
That's true.
Write a book. If you know, I tell you one example, the prayer of Jabez. Oh my God. I have never in my life seen anything more inaccurate than that. That's even more inaccurate than the story of the resurrection. But it had an audience because of the non-denominational group who pushed that. And everybody bought it because it talked about some other things, but one in particular. When he said, talk about expanding his territory or whatever it is, they interpreted that as being their opportunity for wealth. And it took off in sales. So we have to step back, I think, and begin to put in the atmosphere what's really there, as opposed to what someone writes is there. Because when you write it, that's it. Okay. Tired talking.
So let me, I actually just started reading a book about,
Wait, say on there.
oh, I was just going to add something to that. I just started reading a book about the Egyptian religion, quote unquote religion, and how over time the understanding was lost, and it actually, religion as we commonly think of it, came into being. But anyway, one of the first quotes in the book is something from a sage, or from China, Lao Tzu, is I think how you pronounce it. And has anyone heard of the Tao Te Ching?
Yeah.
That book? The very first thing because he never wrote anything down until the end of his life, because the people who were his students convinced him to, kind of at the last second. He was like, all right, fine. But the very first thing he told them to write was, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name.
Absolutely.
And he goes on putting so much mystical, esoteric stuff in the very first paragraph. But anyway, so he was basically talking about where we have to be in terms of our understanding of what it is we are seeking. And that is, what we are seeking is not something that we have given name and form to, as in Zen Buddhism, there's like a saying. They say, don't seek the truth, just drop your opinions. And it will fill the space you create for it. So when we do all this religious stuff, that is us. Essentially, getting off on the fact that we believe we are so intellectual to have come up with all this stuff, and then getting totally lost in the forest of ignorance that creates. So to return to the beginning is also return to the beginning of what you knew, and you can use that analogy as when you were a baby, which was nothing. You didn't know anything. relative to how we understand knowing things anyway. Which is, we understand knowing in an intellectual sense. But the truth is, when you were a baby, you knew and understood more, far more, than we do right now. It's just you didn't have the language and the framework to put it in terms that an adult could understand, because you didn't know how to do that yet. And you had to be taught how to do that.
So we mature into ignorance.
Yeah. And so, in our adulthood, we have to learn how to unlearn what we have learned.
And
Just
that's the difficult part.
Yeah.
But then if it were easy, everyone would do it. So the idea is read it like you never read it before. Hear it like you never heard it before. Because when you hear it like you never heard it before, or read it like you never read it before, then you don't have preconceived ideas about what it is. And the preconceptions that we have are so deeply ingrained until it's almost impossible to do it, but it's not impossible. It's the practice, I think, is simple. I think it's a type of practice as is, meditation type of practice, that if you do it continuously, then you get to the place where you are able to allow things to flow inside of you, or flow to you, or open up to you, however, I don't know, that you never read, that you never gave thought to, but it's there for some reason, and you say, I don't know where that came from. Don't we do that? So I think those are glimpses of what Nick is talking about.
And then we write it down.
Huh?
And then we write it
Yeah,
down.
and then sell it. Yeah, and then sell it. Yeah.
So we won't forget it.
And one of the things because we talk about all kinds of stuff in here, and you can never go back home and relate everything that you heard. So one of the things we should do, and we do, but one of the things I realized that I needed to do when I was first hearing all this stuff and learning it is that don't worry about taking away specific things. Instead, think about what it is that you heard, or what it is that it connects you to in terms of your experience of yourself, and what in yourself you experience, and whether or not it is the result of your own ego having generated something, or whether it is a subtle influence of the reality of what yourself is entering your more mundane awareness. And it's a balancing point that you kind of have to reach with yourself in terms of your ability to recognize when that is happening. Because when it does, that's what you want to connect to. That's what you want to feel for. And it's difficult to talk about, but as I said before, don't seek truth, just drop your opinions.
So,
What about if other people are trying to fill that void with their opinions?
Well, I mean, they can't unless you take it and connect to it and incorporate it. And unfortunately, it's kind of easy to do that if you don't have a sense for who you are, because it sounds convincing. So the person standing in the pulpit or in a position of power in the religion, he's the one throwing out all this stuff that he's connected to, which is ego, intellect. But the people who are listening aren't necessarily connected to that until they agree to be. Then they get stuck.
see, that's the fear of organized religion, that people won't connect to what they throw out there. Raise questions like, okay, you talk about the way we traditionally talk about sin. If they understood that sin is simply things that you're entangled with, as opposed to those things that we label, then their response to it will be different. So the whole idea of the religion is to keep people, what we call in bondage, or keep people dangling with the following the carrot on the string. It's one of the opinions that seemingly most folk, like a lot of people like anyway, is don't let the devil steal your joy, that kind of thing. And never thinking about that when you talk about the devil stealing joy, if it's a devil that you're traditionally thinking the devil is, then you are putting that being on parity with the Creator. Because if the joy, you sing this song, this joy that I have, the word and give the work. So if it came from the Creator and the devil can steal it, then that's putting them on parity. Plus, it says that the devil can do something that you can't do, that the Creator can't do and won't do. That's override your free will. So, because if you got it, you have to allow it to be stolen, whatever that means. You see what I'm talking about? So the bottom line is the reason these opinions are so easily given and accepted is because you check your capacity to think at the door. You don't think. Mm-hmm. And the way you're stopped from thinking is by virtue of saying you don't question God. Making you feel guilty from a child, this is something you don't do. And in that juncture, what you've actually done not only is check your capacity to think, but what you've actually done is taught yourself to be open to everything that comes and to object to everything that doesn't look like what was given to you. This lady said to Kathy was sharing with us one Sunday that this lady said to her, she was asking about some scripture, Kathy was talking to her about it, and she says, I want to hear it, I want to hear it, I want to hear it. Because even if I don't see it the way you see it, I got to go with what we say. Who is we? No, that's not the way we was presented to us, so it can't be true. Who is the we? She was talking about the Southern Baptist Conference. So it doesn't matter what the books say. That's what she was saying. That doesn't matter. So how do you get to the point where it matters what the book says when you're working on a PhD or a degree, or when you're putting a TV together? It matters what the books say. But when it comes to eternity, it doesn't. I don't understand that. How is it that you talk about this darkness being so evil, and then you have a hell house on Halloween where you got kids going through, and you Pope scaring the hell out of them so they can go to heaven, and the kids come through with one of the themes. This guy who thought that he had gone to church, he had rendered his tithe, and he said, I still ended up in hell. And the kids come out and say, well, how am I supposed to know when I'm saved based on what y'all say? So now what happens? They lose a whole group of kids who now won't grow up in that because it doesn't make sense. How does that make sense to you when you are supposed to be, quote unquote, smart? And how can any of this make sense to you when you're supposed to be smart? When you're supposed to be analytical. Because I know physicians, I know people who are researchers, both literary and scientific, and they don't see this. They go to church every Sunday, get all the confusion, and they don't even question it. How does that happen? How does that happen? It happens from childhood. It is no different than the child whose parents abuse it and they want to go back home. The child does not want to go back home to be abused. The child won't go back home because that's where it's familiar. That's what's familiar to it. That's what they're comfortable with. Go ahead, Rich, I see it.
Oh, I was gonna say, my sense would be, but again, I'm just projecting out something. I think a lot of the, let's say you're talking about scientists, whatever, they go to church. I just think they're there for the habit, the social aspect and whatnot. I wouldn't be shocked at all if you could get into the brain of a lot of those people and they are somewhere else. They're not listening to the sermon and all that. They may be singing the songs, but I think that a lot of people, because we, at least in this earth, the way we've built our communities, we're very social beings.
Sad to say, Richard, but they are listening to what's coming across that pulpit. Sit in a dentist chair.
Well, it wouldn't shock me either if they were in their minds, and maybe I'm projecting definitely for myself, where they were silently arguing against it, but they're just sitting there.
You're in a dentist chair, and he comes in, he goes to First Baptist, and he's talking to you about salvation, and he believes this so deeply until laying on his table are those little tracts and stuff. Wherever you go to an attorney's office and you find it's the same things. I'm saying that it goes. I do not believe that they just continue to do that. Just sit there, and they're someplace else, because eventually they end up definitely going someplace else. So it's I think it may be related to being social by virtue of not wanting to be excommunicated or ostracized by the people who you think are influential or the people who you're close to. How difficult was it to walk away from the things that we were taught as children, whether it be a St. Paul, a Beulah, or a, what's that? Oh, we don't know where you came from.
Good aim.
Good aim. You know, what, it doesn't matter where, St. Matthew, it doesn't matter. But how difficult was that? And there was a time, I, as well as everyone in this room, were sitting, believing, accepting, and walking in what we heard. Am I right about it? Yeah. We did that. And my mind was no place else. It was focused. It was right there. And we were involved deeply in what we were being given. And it was, now the difficult came when the introduction to something else was presented, and now we have to make a choice. That's where the difficulty came. And the difficulty was not there because our mindset was not there. The difficulty was there because our mindset was connected to that in a way of an umbilical cord being connected. We were that was our energy, our nourishment. It was there. But at some point, it took time, and gradually we were able to move away from that. Now, I say all that about us in this room, but it's probably one in here who didn't go through that. That's his niece. Didn't go through what we went through in the sense that we went through it, in the depth that we went through it, because at an earlier age, she began seeking than we did. If we had began seeking at her age, we probably got put out or beat up, or got a spanking, or got time out, or something. No time out. I'm sorry. There wasn't no time out. I wish it had been sometime. But that's what we would have gotten. So anyway, the idea of it, of acceptance, is because it's easier. Maybe it's just easier. I go to work all week long, and I come here on Sunday, and you tell me about all this stuff, and the reason I am where I am, if I'm quote unquote succeeding, it's because the blessings of the Lord. And if I'm struggling, it's because I don't have enough faith. So I'm coming each week trying to increase my faith. So either way, they got you. And that's how it works. That's how it works. And the thing that gets me about the lady that I just described that Kathy was telling us about, the whole setting put women under their feet. I mean, women are nothing except baby bearers. and the ones who work in the kitchen, they have no authority or no say-so, no anything. That's, how does that work? Simply because that's what they are given from day one. And at some point, you got to just shut it off and hear something else. I think the greater question may be, why is it that some people can do that and others can't? Is it because of insecurity?
That some people can do what and others can't.
Can say, you know what, there's something more than this, and begin searching for it, as opposed to saying, no, I'm not going there, that's blasphemous, and do we know what blasphemy means, because they didn't, you know what I'm saying? So why is it that you can do it, and someone next to you can't?
Or won't.
I won't. Well, yeah, you won't, because somebody came to my mind instantly when you said won't. Won't do it. I think the won't do it is because they want to remain connected to folks. But why is it, what makes you so special that you believe?
I don't know, we've been taught heavily, Pastor, not to question God.
No, that's what I'm talking about, baby. What makes you, what's so different that you begin to question? That's what I'm asking. What makes you so different that you began to search, you began to raise the question that you were told not to ask?
Started to feel disconnected.
Well, what makes that? What makes you feel that?
I know for me it was wanting more, just more than what was being offered.
The other thing too is it was just, the stuff didn't make sense.
And we're looking at it generationally, you see?
Yeah.
We're looking at it generationally. Because when we look at it generationally, not only do we begin to see the different reasons or the different patterns or the length of time that it took for that to happen, we also began to see the results of that in terms of generationally. In the Depression, in the early 50s, in 72, all these times were financial crisis in this country. 74 rather, the churches were packed. People began to migrate back to the churches. This was the worst financial crisis since the Depression, and people left the church. You see the generational thing? Why did they leave it? Maybe it's because someone was seeking and they began to pick up some energy that when they walked through those doors, the energy said, why are you here? There's no hope. There's no hope here. And they left. So now that they walk away from it, it's easier to do nothing than to say it must be something else. It's easier to say, if that's not true, then how am I ever going to believe what is true? How am I going to know whether it's true or not? So how do we deal with those things? You know, how do you help someone see? I guess that's a heck of a question coming from me. How do you help someone see beyond what they have been taught when they believe what they've been taught is not true?
We don't.
Huh?
We don't.
Yes, you do. How do you do it? You do. Because if you don't, then you would be here.
Are you talking about the situation captives then?
That situation appears to be hopeless. That's going to come from the universe, you know, in terms of the fusion. But I'm talking about in the case of someone who say, you know what, I'm done with church. There's no hope here, there's no truth here. Nothing's working out for me. You see? So, that's what I'm talking about, as opposed to.
You're asking how do you help someone like that?
Yes.
Well, I mean, in what, psychology or psychiatry, whatever, you don't answer, you don't give people answers, you help them redefine the question. And I would think that's the same notion in the sort of Zen process.
That's counseling. Well, you counsel. And maybe that's the strength of what we do. Because rather than just telling you, we invite the question, you know? Like when Nick first started this morning, I would love to see him go to any church and do this. He says, okay, somebody just throw something out. Are there any questions from anybody, or just throw something out? You know? I mean, how long will he survive right now?
He'd survive with the,
Got to get
any
you.
youth they have in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, don't give up on us old people.
But beyond that, you know, and then once they throw something out there, he answers, he's gone because he's misleading our youth. You know, but that's the kind of thing that we are faced with every day, aren't we? Every single day. I think you approach people different based upon who they are in terms of your relationship with them and how they relate. But the one thing that you can always do is be focused on who you are. Because your present is supposed to change the atmosphere. Think about it this way. If you create the world that you live in, right? Then the world that you live in is full of you. Does that make sense? So if the world that you have created and they are a part of that world, then they're in your world. So you don't necessarily have to say anything as much as believe that your presence makes a difference. And know how to respond if a question does come, or know when to be quiet when a statement is made. Does that make sense? What is it?
Not me?
I thought Barbara Jean. She had that smile.
Well, the other thing I try to do with my kids in my class is I try to get them to focus on who is it that you want to be? Who are you? Are you being true to yourself? And not that they fully understand that right now, but I try to tell them, you have to be you. He over there, he has to be him,
Yeah.
and you have to be you. So when you say he made you do something, then are you being true to who you are? Anyway, but I tried.
But that
Yeah,
classroom is
see
your
that.
world.
Yeah.
That's your world. And that's how you influence your world. And that's an excellent example of how we can influence the world that we create outside the classroom. But we feel like, we believe that I can't make you do anything, which is true. We feel like, well, you just go be who you are anyway. No, you're living in my world. And I believe that sooner or later, being in my world, you're going to acquiesce to what I'm putting out here. Hello? Sooner or later, you're going to acquiesce to what I'm putting out here. So, at some point, when you're going to be in my world long, because you're going to leave it. It's just that simple.
Can I share how they do me at work?
Mm-hmm.
They'll get their group, they'll get together in their cubicle and they'll talk and they'll leave me there by myself. You know, they go from cubicle to cubicle. But then there are times when, and I hear the things that they say, but I don't really like what they say. I don't even pay any attention, entertain rather. And then, but when it's something that's serious, I mean, like when they really want to get down to the basic and just talk about stuff, Miss Evelyn.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, or whatever. But sometimes if you're not comfortable with who you are, you're like, oh, they leaving me out. You know what I'm saying?
You saying more than you think you're saying. They can't bring that darkness in your cubicle.
I was gonna say that you'll keep bringing that
That's
superficial stuff.
You're like, I can
We're
live.
looking at it.
That's what that is.
They gotta build it up a little bit first.
I told them I'm gonna get a top put on it and some curtains. And y'all put y'all in here.
Come in with a big bubble, sit inside
Yeah,
there.
but that's what's
They
happening.
isolate you.
A mark
Well,
of
but-
respect, though.
Listen to what you said.
Say that, yeah.
Knowing who you are, that creates an invisible or a spiritual bubble. It really does, of light. So they are drawn to that light when there's a problem.
And a lot of times she probably didn't have to even say it. They kind of feel it.
Yeah.
And so they have, like Jenny said, that level of
You
respect.
know what the other part of that is, Ben?
What's that?
They don't want her to put them out. Don't come here with that mess.
Right.
Well, I guess I've been really lucky, because I can't, you'll characterize situations sometimes that just sound horrific to me. You know, these people talking about you behind your back. They isolate you. You just said that. What is that all about? I've run up against authority the wrong way, but I've never, and I'm sure people talk about me. And when you get semi-annual evaluations and stuff, we do what we call 360s. So your peers can write comments anonymously. And you occasionally get something. But this whole idea that you're in an office,
It's just petty little stuff that goes on.
but the whole, again, I just don't.
Well,
Why?
the difference is the difference between what Evelyn is describing, what Diane is projecting, and what you were saying is not only cultural, but the way you were reared. You were reared differently. And the sense of belonging was much stronger. When you live in that place, Blackwood,
Blythewood. Yes.
Blythewood. When you live, or when you live in a union. For example, on the street that I grew up, every one of us were related. The whole community. And if someone didn't play with you, then you felt disconnected from the group. And you didn't see it as your family. You just saw it as people you knew until you got older and realized that all these are cousins. But see, you grew up traveling, probably around the world. You grew up in a smaller setting than most of us grew up.
Well, at least I grew up, and there's baggage that comes with it. There's nothing.
Of course, I'm not saying it's perfect.
Everything has
either
its
way.
good bad, but I guess for me, I could always get out of town.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, I was there to work. I wasn't there to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I knew some of that went on, and I wasn't part of that. I didn't want to be part of that, but it would have disappointed me if I thought people didn't respect what I was trying to do. Now, that's the way I would translate it.
Yeah.
But they didn't have to like me. I wasn't there to be liked. But
No,
I could
you're
always
not.
find people that did, and we had a good time. And sometimes that rubbed people wrong. But I don't know, it just seems like, I don't want to you go back to that's more dominant in the South, because when you talk about the church, when you talk about all these notions we have that Southerns are very conventional, or forced to be. And then you look at all the movies, look at how segregation, the whole thing worked, which is very hard to change. So you just think, now I'm not saying that other parts of the country don't, because I've lived in other parts of the country and they have their own ways of doing it. But it does seem like that here, whatever the heck that means, it just seemed to have been more of the dominant thing that people couldn't find a
family.
people couldn't find a way through. Well,
There's a
maybe that's the
dynamic, too,
ultimate.
that's gender based.
That's the way they got you at the end of the day. Hey, we're all cousins.
Yeah.
There is a gender dynamic to it, and it's not to say that men don't experience it, but I think women experience it differently, especially when, like, lots of women in one workplace. Like, the social dynamics are just complicated.
Yeah, but to me, it would be, I could only imagine, it would be that way because the culture sort of created you a certain way, then you go all together and all that stuff comes out. But you take those same women, you bring them up somewhere else in southern whatever country, they don't have to
Yeah.
act that way.
Another country maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
But
and see,
same office,
and
it's
the-
like half men and half women has a completely different social dynamic than more women than.
so back to what we were talking about, there is the thing that makes cultures different is energy and understanding. That's what makes it different. But in different ways, the dynamics are pretty much the same. I mean, right now, there are people who think that my kid's fifth cousin is their first cousin because of how they grew up, that deep sense. And if something happens between a couple of them and one of them just say we're not going there with them and just stay away from them, then there is a sense of aloneness there, and they find a way to get back. Now, that also can be a good thing, and in that there is some level of conflict resolution there, and there is some level of, for lack of a better word, compromise there. So it gives opportunity for both parties, not side to be heard or opinion. But when you get to the place where we are talking about, it's not just the workplace. It's also the church. It's also the school. It's also the club. I mean, wherever there is an environment where people assemble, it's there.
Yeah.
You know, it's there. And I would venture to say it's in here.
Yeah,
It happens.
it does.
So
We're their people.
it happens. Now, let me take it a step further, okay? And I don't mean by any stretch of the imagination to separate or to give some sense of superiority. That's not it at all. It's just what others have observed. When it was Myra, whether it was one of my siblings, other people who have observed all of the facilitators in one place say the same thing, that there is a different energy when all of you are together than it is when the experiences are separate. And when all of us are together, that word together can be underscored to the point where nobody cares about who talks about it because because they got something to say, I'm gonna say it. That's just the way it's done. And but what happens is, for example, when we come together again this year, when we do that, what happens? What happens is that everyone is looking forward to the opportunity. Man, it's missed. We need to do this thing, not for us, but because of what we have to do. Now, I say all that to say this. When you get to a place where what you deal with is not you, it's for everyone, for mankind, period. If that becomes your thought pattern every day of your life, then those kinds of things, like you said, because of who I am, it doesn't bother me. Those kinds of things don't bother you. They are simply distractions to move you off course. So the more you think about, well, they talking about me, or they ain't even thinking about you, but you just hear a whisper, or you feel like you got to save everybody, or everybody's wrong except you. When you think like that, then you are the one who is going through some changes because you feel like there's nobody want to be around you. And most of the time, if you go through life and you don't have a friend, out of all of these billions of people on earth, who got the problem? I mean, think about it. What they did, they stayed away from their problem. But really, you think about it. If you go through life like that. So you have to be, in your thought, inclusive, not of Americans, but of all of mankind, period. That has to be what you experience. And when we come together, that's what we experience. And I'll give you an example. When we came together last December, what happened? We talked about bringing balance to the weather patterns, did we not?
Yes.
We have not had a hurricane. The weather patterns have shifted to the places where they were. We experienced a summer, we experienced in the fall. You see what I'm talking about?
You're
Those
right.
seasons were unknown
Yeah.
for a long time. So you know, when people come together like that with one purpose, and that is benefiting mankind by virtue of opening up to the energy flows of the light, that makes a difference. That makes a huge difference. And when you as an individual know that you're the light, darkness does not bother you, and you don't entertain it, you are transforming. And when they come to you, that's what you're doing, transforming, by virtue of just doing it. I mean, you didn't talk about what they told you. You didn't talk about any experience you had with them. You didn't have to. Why? Because all of them are the same. All you need to do is do what you answer their questions, and that's the end of it.
Exactly.
So that's what we have to do in terms of recognizing who we are. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if we are supposed to be facilitators, and we bickering, we can't do it, we can't get it right, we can't, everything we do is friction, guess what? That's what it's going to be with everyone else. Because you can't cover people and you be having friction, and they don't. And we used to have a saying in Gaffney that you can tell what church a person go to by virtue of how they respond to a question or to respond to preaching, the things they say.
That's true.
You can tell that was real. You can tell. So if that kind of effect and influence is there, how much more effect and influence would it be if the facilitators who comes together for the purpose of light had friction? There would be no light. Not coming to the field, you know. So connect to that, if nothing else. Connect to that. And when you talk about the feminine dynamic of it, it is real. But the feminine dynamic of the light with facilitators is different, and has to. And I do believe that that's why things are shifted. And we see that South Carolina is #1 in domestic violence deaths. We see that all these kinds of things. That's the shift. You cannot treat the wound if you don't uncover it. Right? That's the shift. So while everyone else is saying things are getting worse, we see that things are getting better. And if nothing else, we can always look back at how that weather shifted in a very short period of time and hold on to that. And that will help us to walk to the next place, even though we don't know what it is. It doesn't matter. We know who we are. That's what's important. We know who we are. And we have to, I guess, project that to everyone else. So that they say, you know what? You're different. Where do you go to church? And that's a question that a lot of people get. Until you tell them what we do. And then it's over.
Well, it's not really a church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's a teaching kind of.
I tell you what, get
If I want to shut up there and go, we talk about the Kabbalah and stuff. Huh? Okay, boom.
The difference is that we're sitting around in the upstate and people talking to me, but, you know, I'm going to come visit your church. And I said, okay. But please don't expect what you see on Sunday morning. What do you mean? Well, if you come to Great New Faith now, you see 4 to 5 people sitting at a table discussing scripture with the whole body, with the Q&A. I don't see them. They don't show up.
And see, that should sound very exciting. A panel every week?
Yeah, every single week. We sit at that table, and it happened so, it wasn't planned. It was like there was a complicated lesson that it's either Ron or Catherine was working on. And they called me and bounced it off me, and I said, okay, why don't, because they were saying to me, well, you gonna be there, right? And I'm saying, well, why don't all of us just sit at the table and discuss this thing and talk it out and then see how they benefit from it. So we did that. And after we did it, a lady who never says anything about anything, first one, I sure hope you do this all the time because I understand more now than I did before this. And then after that, just everyone will come in because they were seeing, they were getting it. So that's how that came about. And I was asked about how we do it here. And why is, well, you can't tell folks that Nick and Sheldon teach through Skype. What are you talking about? All of us teach at one, together. But we do it through what? The spirit ain't there. I'm serious, I've heard that.
Spirit can't go on Skype.
That's that kind of device.
Why was I putting my hand on the TV set when Oral Roberts, when I was a kid, said, put your hand on the TV set, be healed.
but that's, boy, haven't we come a long way.
Yeah.
But that I guess that's what I'm talking about with the life, Anyway. Okay, Nick, Sheldon, somebody.
We don't have the spirit.
What you say?
I said we don't have the spirit.
Say it again.
I should have known that. You know what I would say if we were not. But Mark, what? You got it. Okay, but really, the build-up or the foundational platform is being presented, I think, for the greater clarity of, I don't want to say the how-to. Okay, if I believe, and I do, that the Ten Commandments, that they are the technology that results in our being what we were created to be once we grasp an understanding of that wisdom, then if that is it, what are we doing now? If prepping for that, then a foundation is something, I don't know. But whatever it is, I know it's leading to that. Because every week it seems that we are talking about where we came from. We talk about the Messianic experience, How do you get to the Messianic experience? So anyway, how do you fulfill the law? I guess that's the question, isn't it? Okay. Any other questions, statements, comments?
I just want to say I felt for a while that the next step or stage, for lack of a better term anyway, that we are supposed to go to is how to actually be conscious of how we are incorporating what we talk about here into our day-to-day life and experience, so that we can do it. I said once before that our understanding is pretty good, and I would be impressed like our understanding is good, but we have to match that with our wisdom in order to be balanced in that regard. And the wisdom is you got to do it, and the understanding it and the doing it are different. In that we can have all this understanding, and this is how I feel about myself as well. We can have all this understanding, but the doing it brings whole new
Yes.
experience, and it's on a whole different level.
Without
So-
the doing, it becomes academic, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the theory is good, but the theory is to support the actual.
Right.
So
I know
I think that's what we
there are those who
what we
say,
need to do. Oh,
go ahead, Nick, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking out loud.
okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I'm breaking up a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we need to be able to do it for ourselves as well as for other people, because when things get destabilized, there have to be stable people present and in the earth, in the city, so that the whole system doesn't need to be reset.
And you know what he's talking about when he said reset, right? So the whole system doesn't have to be reset. Like the pole shift, like the ice age, yeah, reset. That's exactly what that was. Resetting everything that was, resetting the stage for light to be, for light to prevail.
And all the stuff that's coming out, the way that the world works, in terms of all this stuff about the NSA, all of this is related to how people are being brought to a place where they're going to have to make a choice about what they want to connect to. If we choose to go, and I don't believe we will, but if we, you know the movie Mad Max with Mel Gibson?
Yeah.
If what we take our security from, or which is primarily money, if that is taken away, well, it's money and religion. Actually, those two things will be taken away. And if we turn to that Mad Max reality, and again, I don't think it's going to happen, but then the whole system needs to be reset. Because what we have chosen to turn to when the gods that we thought were the real gods were destroyed is ourselves and our own ego, then this season of harvest yields no good anything. And because of that, the fields have to be taken back to where they were so this whole process can begin again. However, if there are people in the earth who provide an anchor point to the spiritual, then the reset doesn't have to take place, because we don't revert back into our egotistical, animalistic self. Once we're given the space by the removal of religion and money, once we're given that space, we can turn to the reality of who and what we are, as opposed to the ego and what it thinks it is. So when I say there have to be people on the earth who can do it, I believe that our very purpose, and as well as those who do the same things that we do, or seeking the same things that we seek, they are to be that anchor and take our whole experience into a whole nother dimension and level. And our experience collectively, as like what it means to be a human being, how we relate to each other, all that. So that's what I felt, and I think that's where we're headed. And religion and money will be taken away is inevitable because they will collapse under their own the weight of their own
Greed.
whatever.
Yeah. Greed and manipulation.
But think about that. What you said, Janice.
Mm.
Greed is the money. Manipulation is the religion. And both are detrimental. So,
Well, they feed each other.
yeah.
Very
They
much.
do.
It's like a
Very much
two-headed
so.
kind of thing.
They've come to.
Beast.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that, Sheldon?
They've come
Yeah, I
to.
did.
Okay.
So just,
No, I know neither are actually sustainable.
so just change your major up there?
Yeah.
Now,
They
this
didn't
is-
have one called world domination, so he took the next best thing.
World manipulation?
Economics.
Economics, yeah.
No line.
Boy, have fun.
Much aligned.
I mean, that might be the best thing because when
I think
because
everybody,
the system itself is shifting and restructuring itself.
me.
So you got to figure out how you can make it work
Yeah.
when we don't think about it in the same way we used to.
Always said that thing. That should be required. Everyone should understand that.
and it's like, in my case, it's like you read the great books of literature before you're ready to understand what they're all about. I studied economics, and I was like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now I've experienced some of it, and now I want to go back, you know? And I think more people should. So you wouldn't be so whimsically distracted by other people's notions of what it all means. You could ask the better questions and have some understanding of him. So
Okay.
But that kind of resonated with me, Janice, what you said about the two-headed monster of greed and religion. Because they're sort of, yeah,
It's a wolf.
they're all coming from the same place.
There's two-headed folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely connected.
That's, I believe you manipulate. Go ahead, Shell, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying they're definitely connected because the whole thing with religion is to actually monetize something or some type of way. You could call it a scheme, but to get resources to a particular group or a particular person. So it is economics.
But I, okay. Well, no, I buy that in general. There's this little voice in the back of my head goes, too easily we generalize this stuff into all religion is corrupted, all economics is corrupted, and it's not. There are people out there who are trying to use money in a good way with each other. There are churches, for want of a better expression, that aren't that, whatever the term is we were using to characterize Baptists, etc. I'm not saying they got all the answers, but there's tension in that. It's not just these two monolithic things that are.
The energies are monolithic. How intertwined and involved people are is up to them. But the
Because
energies
even with
themselves are
those
very much.
particular organizations that are willing to do good, they do those things good as long as you go along with them or for their own. So even in that, it has a purpose. So that is no different than making an investment for future consumption.
I look at that from the missionary perspective.
Uh-huh.
If there's a foreign mission involved, they maintain the status quo. They don't change the life. I mean, like I was telling you about, I met this missionary. They had been in Haiti for like 50 years, and I asked them, "What have you changed?" We were there to buy land and give it to the people, and they got angry because I raised the question, "What have you done in 50 years?" So, from the missionary perspective, the mission is there. The mission is to look like you're doing a great thing, while at the same time you're coming out of Haiti with all these photographs of these kids and and all this film of the villages and what's going on in Port-au-Prince or in what is it, City de Soleil. And you got all these, so you can raise some more money to go back to Haiti to do the same thing all over again. And one of my friends who worked for Smithsonian looks at those little pictures that they show all the time when you send some money. He'd be like, you know what, I bet that child 40 years old now. You know? But that's in itself. And when you bring it to missions locally, then missions locally deals with my members first. And it deals with, well, we are budgeted for this thing, whatever, this mission project, whether it's $10,000 or $100,000. When it's gone, it's gone. Yet, we would tear down this perfectly sound building and pay $7 million for it. You see? So even in that is manipulation and greed. And believe you me, when it comes to denominational missions, I'm very familiar with them. And there are indeed some good people who are involved, but they don't know what they're involved with. But the hierarchy knows what they're involved with. And therein lies the problem. So it doesn't matter whether Evelyn understands that shooting Janice is murder. If she shoots her, she's still dead, whether she understood it or not, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter whether you understand it. If you are operating under the auspices of that authority, and that authority draws its energy from that, then you the hand of one is the hand of all. There has to be a difference made there. So I respect the people who are there with tremendously good intentions, but at the same time I don't have too much respect for the ones who oversee the projects. I remember when the Southern Baptists came to me about 20 years ago and asked to me to become a part of it, and they sent these 3 black ministers and a white minister to come talk to me. And they said to me the things that they would do, but all I had to do was follow the doctrine of the Southern Baptists. And my response to them was, do y'all speak in tongues? They said, no. Okay, we do. That was the end of the conversation. Of course, I was being facetious with them, but they were being serious with me. In other words, you have to do what we do if you want what we are offering you. All of them the same way. All of them. And they brought, the guys they brought were guys who I knew. And they knew that I knew them. And they were to influence me to do that. So the guys were there, but the members were people who were really seeking the truth. They just don't know anybody. Okay, Nick, what's going on? You got your scanner?
I gotta disappear for a few days.
I didn't know who you were going to blame on that one.
Okay, anything else? Are we good?
I'm good.
Okay. You gonna text me this week or what, Nick?
Oh, so what's happening next week? I gotta work next week.
Okay, okay. All right.
I ask you all to wish Nick a happy birthday. He just aged 1 year today.
Oh yeah.
Happy birthday, Nick!
Birthday, Nick.
Nicholas,
Thank
you
you.
getting old like us.
I know.
How old are you?
26.
Wow.
My God,
I
you
feel
old.
so old. Thanks for that, Nick.
Really?
You asked.
Yes.
Come sit in this part of the room.
We were moving about looking stuff here, right? And this guy was talking about, he said, well, this is how we do it. I'm saying, no, you don't do it like that. Because I'm doing it the easy way. And I said, how old are you? He said, 36. And I said, if you reverse that, you might know how to do this. And he understand. I'm like, that's me. Reverse your age. Then you understand how to figure out, do stuff easier. Because, you know, brute strength, no sir. Not James Richard. Gotta be a better way. Even if you got to pay somebody.
That's usually where I am.
Yeah.
Pay somebody.
You know what I rationalize that, right? Other people need a job. But,
I'm getting with that. So it's just getting you know what it is? It's not, for me anyway, it's not doing it, the recovery time takes longer.
and I don't want that.
Yeah.
So, we ready, right?
Hmm.